Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's podcast where we will be talking with my friend Laurence. Laurence Easeman's here today. There's a lot of subjects we're going to be covering today. We're going to be talking about Liverpool, Nietschze, Jung, the lockdowns, and everything in between. Laurence, thanks very much for coming in today.
Thanks for inviting me, Richard. Yeah.
How do we know each other?
I think it's through our mutual friend, Tony Moran.
Mr. Tony Moran.
Who was the first guest on my podcast.
Oh, was he? Yeah.
Yeah, the great and honourable, noble Tony Moran.
And what's your background with Tony? How do you know Tony?
Tony, let me just think. We used to do meetings in Liverpool in which we would talk about our rights and our freedoms and how to enforce them and how to achieve them and how to push back the encroachment of the state upon our lives. And Tony just was a person who turned up and, we hit it off and we've been friends since, and that was in 2013.
Tony showed me a video of you. I believe it's a viral video of you on YouTube. How many views has that one got?
Well, it's been taken up and down over the years.
Okay.
But during its initial life cycle, it must have done about 3 million views.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a viral video of you doing what exactly?
Resisting an eviction. It was called People versus the Banks, Conviction Beats Eviction.
Right.
Yeah.
And what were they trying to do in that? There was bailiffs in the video who were trying to move people out of a property, right?
Yeah. So it was an eviction of a friend of ours in Potter's Bar outside London. And we were involved with a group of people who were resisting what we understand to be the fraudulent mortgage system.
Right.
And this came on the back of researching and discovering one of my early red pills, which was the Fiat Federal Reserve System, or the fractional reserve system of money creation, and the ability of these private so-called banks of creating money out of thin air. Once we discovered that scam, then the natural, thing to follow next was banks lending, mortgages, and how the ability of banks to control interest rates can be used to steal our properties through the mortgage scam. So once you discover these things and you go into researching them, I mean, there's one thing having belief, but I think we should all transition from belief to knowledge. And knowledge is experiential. You have to put yourself into the arena in order for you to be able to know something is true or false. Just having the belief, I don't think, is enough. Sometimes it may help, but, I think that's what it is. So that's the kind of what I did when I made these amazing discoveries at the time. I thought, well, I've got to go and test it. So joined up with a lot of other people around the country who were testing the validity of the mortgage scam. And I did it with my own mortgage. I tested that, and I went into a long battle through the courts, which took over 5 years. I was in and out of every court in the bloody country, and I even ended up in the Court of Appeal. And this led me to a deep understanding of the fundamental principles of law and what our rights are within the law and how we can enforce them to the best of our abilities. And so from my experience gleaned in the courts, we began to help people who were facing eviction.
Could you just briefly explain for people what the mortgage scam is?
Well, it's money creation. As we understand it, we believe that we're being lent money from someone who's deposited it in the bank, but that's not true. Under the fractional reserve lending system, banks create money out of thin air based upon a small amount of their reserves. So a bank may have 10% reserves, but be able to fractionalize that 10 times. So they can lend 10 times the amount they hold on reserve because nobody asks to claim the reserve. Because that causes a run on the bank. So this is the fundamental fraud at the heart of the banking system.
So we say the bank has lent me the money to buy the house.
They haven't.
But they actually haven't.
They've created it out of thin air using fractional reserve lending, right? And, we can go deeper into that, which is about the whole system of usury and interest on money. money that doesn't exist, right? That is created out of thin air, but yet we're meant to, pay an interest on top of that.
Yeah.
So it's a fraud built on a fraud built on a fraud, and it's very old and it's very ingrained. But and the mass formation that is used by the system in order for people to believe it is quite deep and quite insidious. So that realization for me made me ask the bank, okay, can you demonstrate the loan, or your claim over the loan? And then you find out that the banks have securitized the mortgages by selling them to offshore companies, which they're not allowed to do, or they do it in such a way that, obfuscates the truth. So all this kind of information knowledge led me to go, okay, well, let's test it. Let's find out whether this is true or false. Tested it in the courts myself, and, was up against, quite senior judges, not up against, they're the arbiter. It was up against the bank, and found out loads of interesting stuff. But one of the main things is that they're not going to let this scam be exposed because they're in on it.
Yeah.
Right. But that didn't stop us from trying, because every time you push the system, every time you go up against the system, you gain new knowledge, which strengthens you for the next round of tests that you want to endure. So this led us to going around the country testing the eviction process, because we knew the eviction process was fundamentally flawed as well, because 99% of the time when the bank comes to take the property, the owners have left.
Right.
Right. So therefore,
it's easy for them.
It's easy for them, right? So therefore, they've become complacent over the years and aren't following the rules that, they govern themselves by. So we were testing that. We must have done about 5-10 evictions, and each one we were steamrolled by the bailiffs and the police. Yeah. So each time we were steamrolled, we gained new information and new knowledge that gave us a better chance of success.
Were these evictions for non-payment of mortgage?
Non-payment of mortgage, refusal to pay a mortgage, challenging the bank, multiple things.
Yeah.
But the thing is what people don't understand, because people say, oh, just pay your bills, just pay your mortgage. Right? If it was a fair and just system in which real money was considered, right, then, that might be an argument. But while the banks control interest rates and the power to inflate and deflate, that means that the initial contract that you entered into changes when they inflate the currency and increase the interest rates. Okay. Therefore, you may not be able to pay anymore because they've changed the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Right.
And we all for some reason just accept that.
We all just accept it because of the mass formation. Yeah. So there's multiple reasons why someone may lose their home. Yeah. And those things aren't considered generally because people don't really truly understand. And I'm not saying I do, right? But some of the arcane tactics that are used in finance behind the scenes. So in an effort to enforce our rights, we took them on. We got steamrolled early on, and then our knowledge and experience was accumulating until we had the perfect storm. And this perfect storm was the fact that it was we understood the eviction process and even had access to the documents that they keep secret during the eviction. And it was in Potter's Bar. It was, a sleepy little town. And enroll the eviction busters, and then enroll the bailiffs. And we couldn't have asked for better bailiffs on that day because they were literal pantomime villains. Right. There was like a cardboard cutout of what you imagine every worst bailiff could possibly be. Yeah. So first of all, we had that going for us, right? Yeah. And then secondly, we, the police that turned up upon my request, right, were like country police. Okay. And so they weren't seasoned like Liverpool Matrix or something, right? Right. This was all a new experience for them. And it was in this nice pastoral green land, right? In this garden. And the die was cast, and we went to battle, we engaged in the struggle. And in that video, it's only 28 minutes, but it went on for about 2.5 hours. Right. It was just the beauty of editing that gave it the narrative that it had. But it was a standoff between the bailiffs trying to force their way in and us as a group resisting them with our documents and paperwork. And, I had a clipboard.
Yeah, it's quite funny watching you run around with this clipboard citing the laws.
It worked, right? So
and they clearly didn't know what you were talking about, which is quite funny in the video. If people Google your name and eviction, they'll find some iteration of this video on YouTube somewhere.
If they put in people versus the banks, conviction versus eviction, it's there. People keep uploading it.
Yeah,
taken down and people upload it.
And it's at points it's unintentionally funny, isn't it? Because they're clearly totally befuddled by what you're saying to them. So you've got this this Scouse fella running around the front of a house with a clipboard citing these laws, and these two bailiffs, they go, well, I've come to take the house, that's all I know.
They're Scousers.
Yeah, there's a Mavi Scouse in front of this fucking house.
Yeah. Oh man. But it was like, what it was like for me, it was because ultimately we won the day, right?
Yeah.
And the police did what their job is, and they're there to prevent a breach of the peace.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not there to support a bailiff because it's a civil matter.
Yes.
Police have no jurisdiction in a civil matter other than to prevent a breach of the peace. We weren't breaching no peace, and ultimately the police told the bailiffs to go away. But
because they were the ones who were starting to breach the peace at that point.
Yeah. And we were citing important documents that says force can't be used on an eviction.
Yeah.
Right? Because ultimately it's a civil matter.
Yeah.
Right?
So they can't take a hammer and smash the front door in.
It gets complicated at a certain point in the process.
Yeah.
Some authorities claim they can, but others don't. But that's a separate matter.
Okay.
But what that was a real win for us, right? And that's why we all applauded, because we'd had a series of defeats, right? And it was, an experience that showed us that we can fight for our rights. We can win. We can push back. And it was like having Jedi powers.
Right.
These aren't the droids you're looking for, right? And it shows that, words are powerful. The use of words are powerful. And in certain scenarios, they can cause aggressors to back off.
Yeah.
So that was the experience. It was great. It was an amazing day. I'll never forget it. I've got it in great detail in my head. And then I held off from publishing it for about 8 months because it was a bit like, this is going to get me in so much trouble. And I posted it. I forget the reason why, but I posted it anyway. It just went boom. And it went viral all around the world. People in Afghanistan, in China, in North Korea had about 5 views, right? It was just massive. It was a really unexpected viral sensation for a while. And it was a bit, whoa. I walked down the street and people asked me about bailiffs, and all of a sudden I was I didn't really want to go too deep.
You're the go-to expert on the whole
but I didn't want to be the go-to expert on bailiffs. That was not something I chose, So that was, it was a really great moment, and I really enjoyed the success that it brought, but it had the downside as well.
Yeah.
And that video brought me to the attention of Russel Brand.
You're right.
Yeah, and that's the another part of the story.
Before we get to the Russel Brand story, which I do want to talk to you about, I'll ask a more general question. Why do you even care about this subject?
Because I believe the two immutable laws of the universe are truth and justice, and that in pursuit of truth and justice, you will bring happiness, right? And I think, other than life, property, and the pursuit of happiness, what else is there? So for me, it feels like the right thing to do. It feels like the thing that will make me happy, and hopefully, it can make other people happy too. So I don't know why I'm driven to those things, but I just am.
If you were to psychoanalyze yourself in terms of childhood experiences, is there anything in your formative years where you'd identify it as going, this might be why I'm so concerned with this kind of an issue?
I was always I've always been a rebel of some degree, but I was expelled from 2 schools before I was 15, but I didn't finish school. I left at 15. I was asked to leave.
Why? Why were you expelled, and why?
Challenging authority.
You see, there's a theme here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't respect authority, and I do, but true natural authority, then of course, I'll submit. But I won't consent to tyrannical or despotic authority that's telling me to do something that I disagree with just because they're telling me to do it.
Right.
They have to have the truth and justice on their side in order to be able for me to comply.
Do you think this is a genetic predisposition?
I have no idea.
we discussed this, didn't we, when it came to the lockdowns? I was actually on the interview I did on your podcast. You know, the Scouse mentality. There's the Viking element. There's the Irish rebel element there. Yeah. It just so happens that you, as a person from Merseyside, decided to take on the banks and the entire mortgage system and the police and the bailiffs. Coincidentally, you know, I just wonder if there's something in the water or there's something in the atmosphere here, because it tends to be quite a rebellious place.
Well, you know, historically, the native people of these islands were Celts, you know, and we have, you know, endured a conquest from the south in which we've seen an increasing encroachment upon our natural rights, and therefore, you know, it's generational that we find ways to oppose that encroachment, that tyranny, that despotic nature of the state, and, you know, fight for what we believe in and what we think is right. Now, don't get me wrong, I've made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, and I've gone down alleyways that I wish I didn't have, but I did, and it was all part of the experience. But yeah, I think there's a lot to do with the, you know, historical narrative of the country. I mean, sorry, go on.
Just for Americans who will be watching this, when you say from the south, can you explain to them what you mean?
I mean, I'm not an expert. This is just my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? And my opinion is always subject to change based upon new information. Right? But it seems to me that, you know, the Anglo-Saxon, the Norman invasion changed the structure of this country fundamentally. Right? So before the Norman invasion and the Norman conquest, we didn't really have a feudal system here. We had an allodial system in which each man owned his patch of land. And we had, you know, an elected king, wasn't hereditary, tax was voluntary. You know, all those glorious utopian things that we dream about. Well, that used to exist here pre-Norman times. And then the Normans came, they brought the feudal system in which no longer was a man the owner of his land. He became a tenant and had to pay to literally stand on the land to his feudal lord. So that was the beginning of the transition from, you know, this more utopian lifestyle that we had on these islands to the system that we have today, from the natural aristocracy that existed before the Norman conquest to absolute monarchy, then to constitutional monarchy, and to its current form, democracy, which is just a further erosion of our rights and freedoms.
For those who are only listening, democracy was given air quotes and a sardonic smile if you're only listening on the audio podcast. You said from the south, though. Yeah,
so the south is where the Norman invasion happened, and somewhat the Anglo-Saxon.
That's where they came in from.
That's where they came in from, yeah. And it was called the harrying of the North. You know, the Norman conquest was called the harrying of the North. And what it did is it was one of the first, you know, documented tactics of the scorched earth policy. Burnt all the fields, burnt all the lands, got rid of all the crops, and starved the native population. So, and then they introduced the feudal system, which enslaved the natives and forced them to pay a tax to, you know, the feudal landlord.
Yeah.
So that's the historical nature, I believe. You know? And I think it's deeply ingrained within our collective psyche, you know, that it's not just true or correct, and therefore we have a duty. It's not just, I don't think it's a choice. We have a duty to oppose those who seek to enslave us.
Yeah. To just to provide further context for people who don't know the history and the geography of the place, France is obviously south and somewhat east of us. So if you're coming in from that side, that's where you're going to come up from. We also have this, there was the Romans who invaded from the south. Their centre was in London, and then it branched out from the south upward. Tyranny tends to come from the south in this country.
Yeah.
There was the Dane law. The Danes, where we actually had a dividing line right the way through the country between north and south, where different laws and different kings.
Well, the Dane geld, we had to pay them in geld every few years. Right. They came over and said, "Give us some gold, or we're going to attack you again."
Yeah, and that's the Danes were the generic term for all the Scandinavian, the Vikings essentially, and their kings and their feudal system. So the thing that I always try, like, because you want that nuance. We understand it as Brits, we understand it, but Americans, Australians, Canadians, I think are less likely to. Think Game of Thrones. You know, you've got the Men of the Night's Watch with the Yorkshire accents up in the north, and then you've got all that gold and wealth and incest and depravity down in the south. What are they called? What are the ones in the south called?
Cockneys.
Cockneys. Fucking Cockneys. Savannahs. What in Game of Thrones, you got Stark was in the north. Who's in the south? Go on, Jacob. Pull that up, Jamie.
We haven't got Ben here today. Who's the Game of Thrones expert?
He's the Game of Thrones expert.
I did watch all of Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Did you watch it all?
All of it, yeah. It was so disappointing the last season.
Oh,
They
the
just-
last
they
season was
just
terrible.
ruined the franchise.
They wiped their arse with the main characters.
But that
It
was based on
ridiculous.
English history, wasn't it?
It's essentially it's English history.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Picts and the Scots and the Hadrian's Wall or the Danelaw, that it actually depicts quite well the difference in culture, like how stark these and Men of the Night's Watch being very covered in black and very dour sort of types, tough, keeping out the savages from the north. That's our history. That's real history.
Yeah.
What do you got, Jacob? I can't remember any of their names. I read the books, Westeros and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is not a bad way for people to start to understand how
But the
how country's built.
the American experiment came as a result of the despotic period of English history when George III, I think it was, went crazy, and that's, everyone started to leave to go to America, and they tried with the American Constitution and their form of republic is somewhat similar to the earlier natural aristocracy that we had before the Normans came.
Yes.
And it's, they have an elected king, the president, but he has a fixed term. Now,
So
they
you-
didn't originally.
So you're saying the American experiment was a throwback to another period of British history a few
Because they
centuries
were
before?
escaping despotic, absolute monarchy.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they
so-
wanted that.
Thomas Jefferson talks about it in it's a brilliant article. If you ever look up allodial, the allodial system, which was the system that preceded the feudal system, is that Jefferson talks about what England was like before that conquest.
Right.
Yeah, and he is, one of the most influential men within the American formation and stuff. So yeah, I think it was a revolution in the true sense of the word in going back.
Yes.
Rather than going forward.
Right.
Now, that's been subverted now because what did Franklin say? You've got your republic if you can keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't keep any form of political system that is just and true if you don't have control of the money.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have control of the money, the people who do have control of the money can use the creation of money out of thin air to bribe, buy, or threaten anyone.
Yes. Yeah.
So, we can talk about these utopian ideals all day long, but until we have control of money creation, as in the people of the country who contribute to the finances of the country through our labor, then it's a futile argument and it's a wasted discussion.
Yes. Yeah. 100% agree. The thing that you mentioned earlier in relation to the mortgage fraud, could you explain a little bit more about fiat currency and the difference between actual currency versus fiat currency? Because a lot of people, I've explained it on my channel, but I think I see people's eyes glazing over when I talk about it.
Economics is the most unsexy subject going, isn't
Right.
it? Right. Nobody really wants to talk about it, But I'm not an expert, right?
Yeah.
But it's from what I've picked up along the way. But fiat is by order, so it's by decree. Yeah. So whereas previously our money was tied to either gold or any form of physical value, right? That gave it its tradable value.
Yeah.
Fiat is just by decree.
Yeah.
I say there's £1 million and there's £1 million.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any inherent value or connected to any, substantive material that can be used as, because originally, what happened is we put our gold in banks and then the bankers realized that nobody comes for the gold.
Right.
It just sits there. So maybe we can lend it out. So then they started to create receipts of the gold, which was then traded amongst each other. And that was money. Yeah. But the money was tied to the real value, which was the gold in the vault.
Yes. Yeah.
And then when they realized that nobody was coming for the gold and that they could keep creating these receipts, they create 2 receipts for 1 piece of gold.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they've just doubled their wealth just by creating an extra piece of paper by fiat, by decree.
Yeah.
And then they realized that nobody was still coming.
Yeah.
And then they kept creating more receipts,
Yeah.
more fiat banknotes until they were fractionalizing their reserves by 20, 30, 40 times. Who knows how many times they fractionalize it by, but
This is all legal. It's all.
well, I wouldn't know whether it's legal, but it's just not discussed.
Yeah.
The Bank of England is meant to be a national company, a nationalized bank. But if it's a nationalized bank, who are we paying interest to? Why are we, as a country, lending money off the Bank of England in exchange for government bonds or whatever the system they use, and we then pay interest to the Bank of England on the money that they've given us to use into the economy? Who's getting the interest? Why are we even paying interest on money that's meant to be nationalised through the Bank of England? Right? And then also the directors of the Bank of England are private. So we don't know who the directors of the Bank of England are, and that information hasn't been released. But yet we're told the Bank of England was nationalised in 1945.
Hey, hang on a second. All right, that's going to take a little bit of a download there. I've had fractional reserve banking explained to me about 10 different times, actually by a guy who was a name at Lloyd's, and he was the former Minister of Finance for the Turks and Caicos Islands, and I still didn't get it, but I just got it when you explained it now.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the Bank of England was simultaneously nationalised and the board of directors was private.
Yeah.
How does that work?
To make
then?
the rules up as they go along. But
how's that democratic?
But then you go back to the true source of power in England is the City of London, right? And the City of London is an ex-Roman garrison. Yeah. And then when the Normans came in, they couldn't beat the City of London, the Roman garrison. Therefore, they entered into a contract with the City of London, which was, you leave us be, right? You crack on and take over the rest of England, which is written in the Magna Carta, that the City of London's rights, privileges and freedoms will be unhindered.
Right.
And then as a result of that, the City of London provide, I think, the only unelected person in the Houses of Parliament who's called the Remembrancer. And the Remembrancer is a man who whispers in the ear of the Speaker of the House of Commons that any laws that encroach upon the City of London's autonomy are illegal under the Magna Carta, and therefore they pull back. He's called the Remembrancer. He makes the House of Parliament remember what the original agreement was between the Norman
if they
conquerors.
start deviating from it, he shepherds them back in.
So therefore, the City of London the Bank of England is in the City of London, as are the Court of Justice.
For people who don't know London, there is a city called London, generally surrounded by the M25, and that's the city limits. There's like 9 million people in there. But within that London city, there is a City of London, which is a much tighter area, isn't it?
It's a mile square.
Mile square. Ex-Roman garrison. That was the headquarters for the Romans when they had the country. And it exists.
But they didn't, when the Romans pulled out, they maintained that garrison.
Did they really?
Yeah. And that's what if you read the Magna Carta, you can see the negotiation between the City of London garrison and the Norman conquestors.
So they didn't fully leave?
No, they left the foothold because it was a source of power for them.
We're going to have to talk about the Roman Catholic Church soon. Okay, so now I will not bluff my way through this. You know better than me. So there is a in inverted commas, in air quotes, a City of London inside London City. But it's
a city state. It's not a city as we like Liverpool. It's a city state in which the Queen, when she enters, she has to bow
because it's a separate.
It's a separate entity. It's in the same way the Vatican City is a city state.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Within Italy. And the same way Washington, D.C. is allegedly a city state within America.
I didn't know that. I knew Vatican was a city state within Rome itself, isn't it?
Yeah. Which are sovereign nations, which have their own powers and can issue their own taxes and their own laws.
Okay, now let's do that again because we've got to be careful here. So does is its proper legal title the City of London?
Yeah.
It is the City of
London.
The City of London.
And when you enter the realm of the City of London, within London, they have two massive red dragons.
Yes.
Which tells you you're entering into that land, that territory.
Is that the same place as is it within the City of London where if you become a solicitor, if you become a barrister, you pass the bar. Is that within the city?
Well, it's
of London?
in the City of London.
Is
so
it?
the
Yeah.
legal system in this country,
So the Temple Bar is
it's within the boundary of the City of London.
So guys, in America, you know this. You know that passing the bar means somebody's become a lawyer. It's actually the Temple Bar within the city of
Yeah.
where you have to kill one baby and then drink some gypsy tears. Well, whatever process they used to do. But it was a physical, like almost magical ceremony or ritual they would go through.
They've been initiated.
They're initiates. Yeah.
They've been initiated into the further mysteries of, what's happening behind the curtain, which, we generally don't know, because until you've been initiated, it's only a belief or an opinion. It's not actual real knowledge.
Okay. So, but it doesn't, are you saying it exists as a separate legal entity in effect?
The City of London is a separate entity to the rest of the UK. But it's not talked about. But it's all there. You've only got to scratch the surface. There's a brilliant documentary that you should watch called The Second Empire. I think it's called The Second Empire. And this documentary maker tells you all about how once the British Empire, once the military phase of the British Empire ended during the Second World War or after the Second World War, it shifted into a financial empire, right, and used its territories around the world as a place to hide money or to put assets offshore out of the reach of creditors who sought to take them, the people being the creditors.
Right. Where the creditors.
But the second, I think it's called The Second Empire, it really goes into this in detail and tells you a lot about the City of London, the history of it, the laws it's governed by, the powers that it's got, and the financial empire it's sits atop of.
Right. Yes. I was like, I love talking about this, where I've tried to explain the fiat currency thing to people in the past. I always pull out like UK paper money actually still says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of. But if I'd left a donkey and a nice sword with you, then the promissory note would say, I promise to pay the bearer on demand a donkey and the nice sword.
Because that's just a receipt of the asset.
Because it's a receipt of the physical asset, which then generally became gold.
But it's no longer that, because they separated it from the gold standard in the 1970s, and it just became a piece of paper that you're passing around.
So what it says now, instead of I promise to give you a donkey and a nice sword, is it just says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. Another fucking promissory note. So we get a note that becomes a note that becomes a note. Isn't that right, Jacob? I promise to pay the bearer on demand.
The biggest power of the fiat economy and the fractional reserve system is the ability to inflate. Inflate means printing more money, and deflate the currency means pulling money out of the system. Right, is that with a fractionally reserved fiat economy, that becomes as easy as given on your whim. In the same way, Biden has just said, "Oh, we give 33 billion to Ukraine." That's just go put the printer on, print out 33 billion. It's as simple as that. They've inflated the currency,
but they don't even need to print the cash, do
no,
they?
it's digital, but it's
all digital.
Yeah, but it's still about.
It's even worse.
It's even worse than that. But it's so they don't even need the paper anymore. But it's more about their ability to be able to inflate and deflate the currency, because when they inflate it, they have more money to buy real assets. Be that land, property, businesses, or whatever. Or money becomes cheap and bank loans are easy, and therefore business expands, and but they're all on the basis of a loan from the bank. Now, when they're ready to flick the switch and go from an inflationary currency to a deflationary currency, there's less money in circulation, and therefore the power to pay becomes less. Money becomes more expensive, and you don't have the money to pay your bills, at which point the bank call in the loan. And what they've give you is a piece of paper, and what you've staked is a real asset. So when they deflate the currency and you can't pay, they go, okay, thank you, and take the real asset.
There's pure gangsterism when you look at it.
Absolute gangsterism, It's 100% legalized robbery.
It's not extortion, but it's robbery. It's robbery. Well, it's extortion to the extent of do it or else a terrible thing will happen. You'll lose your house, you'll get evicted, or you get really bad credit, or
and this is why it's either part of the propaganda of the state and the mass formation is that when people who challenge these things, they're called names, whether pay your bills or whether it's conspiracy theorist or whatever name they want to use, that's done to silence you or to stop people from listening to you, because simply they don't want you to expose what is fundamental fraud at the heart of the system. And, it's the sunlight is the best disinfectant, isn't it? So when you shine a light on these things, they're like vampires and they recoil back into the shadows. So they will do what they need to do with the agents within the field to try and shut you down.
And I don't know about in the UK with a lot of these things, probably like most people, I tend to know a little bit more about how it happens in America. But if somebody starts piping up and they're saying things that they don't want them to say, they have two adjectives that have become verbs. They'll say problematize the target or controversialize the target. So if you're popping off and you won't shut up, you'll become problematized or controversialized. And they'll find something that smears your name with that.
Yeah, and that's just part of your trial of fire.
Right.
Is that's, going to the gym and lifting muscles doesn't make you a man, right? Is your initiation through the trial of fire is what, they're trying to find out what you're made of, and you're trying to find out what you're made of as well. Yeah. So I think, if, you're committed to what you're doing, then you've got to know that these barbs and arrows are going to come your way. And then it's about, well, can you survive the ordeal?
What slings and arrows of outrageous fortune have you received on this journey?
So that's part of another part of the story.
Yeah.
Is that, after the glow of success, after being a hero, right?
The working class hero.
After being a working class hero, right? After the success of the eviction video, then came the ordeal. So that video brought me to the attention of Russel Brand.
Right.
And Russel Brand wanted to meet me, and I went to meet him. We got on really well. And he said, do you want to work with me? So we began talking and seeing each other in more depth. And I'd go to some of the events he was doing, like stopping an eviction. And he asked me if I wanted to do an interview to contribute to his book, Revolution. Now, at the time, Russel Brand was probably one of the most famous people in the country, because he came out and said the ultimate taboo, which is don't vote, right? And in this sacred democratic system, that is like a heretic who needs burning at the stake. And he was, he became the target of quite a lot of, attacks, because he was saying these things that shouldn't be said.
Yeah.
So kind of, that's how we were pushed together. And there's a side story in which, we were campaigning against Luciana Berger, who was an MP in Wavertree, with an independent candidate. So that was another side issue. And then also, I was on a deep research of the history of money creation and the struggles that had been fought in the past by whom. Yeah. And there's a fantastic book which everyone should read on the subject. It's called The Banking Swindle by Kerry Bolton.
Okay.
And he charts all these struggles and battles that we've had throughout the ages in relation to usury, right, and interest. That's the ultimate enemy of money. Right?
It's banned in the Islamic banking world, isn't it?
It used to be banned for 900 years in the Christian world.
Was it really? Yeah.
900 years, but it was a capital punishment. You'd be punished by death.
Really?
Yeah.
And what's usury in just for everyday people who do
interest on money, right? But also unearned income. Right? It's money that you didn't earn, right? It's off the back and sweat and toil of somebody else.
It's parasitic.
It's a form of slavery, right? It's parasitic, yeah. But if you've got £100 and I lend you £100 and that's the only money in circulation, and I say I want £110 back, where are you getting the £10 from?
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So you can never pay it back.
Yeah.
In essence.
Yeah.
Right. So usury, is at the heart of the system, and it's not talked about. Right. It's a taboo. Yeah. And so I was researching that, and that's what he talks about in that book is the historic struggle against usury and all of the tools, techniques, and methods that have been used by various governments throughout the ages in order to combat it.
Yeah.
And it led me to a bit of research into what happened in the Second World War. And it was, an area that I'd never looked at before. And there was an inherent struggle there between money, finances, banking, and as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, which enslaved the German people with money that they couldn't afford back, that led to all of the events of the war. And then I watched this film, right, which was an internet film, which is an alternative view of World War II. And it gave me some information that I'd never received before, which in the way I am, right, I need to go from belief to knowledge. So I have to try and experience these things in order for them to, I can reject them as truth or false. Mm-hmm. So being the way I am, I wanted to talk about these things that I'd learned in this film. Little did I know, right, that quite naive of me at the time, and I made some errors there, was that Liverpool is an intense stronghold for communism, right?
You didn't know that at the time?
I kind of knew from my history with my grandmother and stuff, but I didn't know how intense and how much of a stronghold it was, and that you're simply not allowed to talk about anything other than the official narrative of World War II. And it got me in quite a bit of trouble, only asking questions. I wasn't making statements because I didn't know anything about it.
So what would be the from a strictly communist point of view, what would be some of the things that you cannot say, or that they really don't want you to? What questions do they not want you to ask?
In this country, there's the victory cult of the Second World War, isn't it? Is that this country largely, our modern narratives are built on the victory of the Second World War, which, I'm all with to a large degree, but it was things about banking that I wanted to know more about. I wanted to know more about what was actually going on in Germany with the financial system, who was manipulating it, what sides were people on.
You mean before the Nazis took power and Hitler was voted in?
Yeah. Right. So what were the events that led up to the Second World War that caused the Second World War?
And you're not saying that people who would identify at the time as Nazis were right, but what you're saying is you're asking the question, well, what were they thinking about the banking system that would have led to that?
For us to be able to understand what happened, we have to know the facts and events that led up to it.
And we need to have an open adult conversation. Even if you don't agree with what National Socialists at the time thought, you'd like to know what they thought.
But I'm not a socialist, right? So,
right. You're not a Nazi. You're not a communist. You're not a fascist.
I don't deny any of the names that my enemies call me.
Right.
That's their job.
But was that what they were doing?
Anything. So they call me a conspiracy theorist, a Nazi, an anti-Semite, a racist, a sexist, whatever.
Let's deal with anti-Semite. Why would a person in your position, what would I have to do that you did that would get me called an anti-Semite?
Talk about the Second World War and
talking about the Second World War.
Talking about the events that led up to it and the banking issues.
Okay, so the banking issues in Germany. If you say, what were the banking issues in Germany? Pre the rise of Hitler and the National Socialist Party.
The anti-Semitic smear is simply to silence you.
100%.
Yeah, that's it.
But I'm just wondering what I would have to do. Is it as simple as saying what was going on in the banks in Germany? Is that all I'd have to do?
Try it and find out.
Yeah, so exactly, fuck around and find out, as the Americans say. So if I released a YouTube video and I was like, hey, in the 1920s and after the Treaty of Versailles, what was going in the German system of banking that would lead people to feel such a strength of resentment that they would go along with this very severe ideology? Something must have been happening. And if I did that, you're saying that my comments would fill up with anti-Semites.
Well, not so much these days. Right, so when I was talking about it, it was in 2014.
Okay.
Long time ago. And it was an extremely short period of my life. It was 6 months. So for 6 months, my focus was on what happened during the Second World War. That was it.
Yeah.
And I haven't been back there since.
So by questioning the official narrative of the Second World War alone, you can be called an anti-Semite.
Well, yeah, I'd say so, yeah. I mean, you do your own research and then you tell me what you find.
And
then, let's discuss it and find out what's the truth. I don't understand why we can't talk about these things. Now, in no way do I endorse what happened in Germany. I'm an Englishman. My loyalties lie with England. So that was anyway. So that was a period in which I started to receive, the attacks in order to silence me, because they don't want you talking about usury or money creation or finance, because that's at the heart of the system, right? So it's easy for them to silence you with the names that they throw at you.
Because you don't want to be called an anti-Semite. You don't want
It's
to be
not
called
that you don't want to be
racist,
called an anti-Semite. It's what are the consequences, right, of that smear on your character, right? That's what it's more about. It's about the defamation that they cause to your character and prevent you from earning a living.
Right.
That's the objective, because everyone's entitled to free speech until it comes, up close to my ability to earn a living.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what defamation law is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I initially ignored it and I thought, not even dealing with it, bullshit, blah, blah. And then I'm getting closer to Brand. And then there was a few anonymous blogs that started coming out and just blanked them. And then Brand asked me if I wanted to be a guest on a debate panel for the launch of his book, Revolution. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Quite a step up for me. But I thought, okay, yeah, there was a distinguished panel. And when he posted news that I was on the panel, all hell broke loose on Twitter, and it became a feeding frenzy, saying
You got dogpiled.
I got dogpiled. This was in 2014, remember?
Right.
Pre-Trump. Trump changed the game because what was previous to Trump politically incorrect, he moved the territory of the cultural war back so that we could talk about more subjects.
Right. Okay.
Right. So it was before Trump, the left had total control of the narrative.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, the things that I was getting attacked for now would just seem commonplace.
That's interesting. I've not heard that ever described before. So you're saying there's a timeline. Let's call it let's say a Twitter timeline. Obviously, it's more than Twitter. And pre-Trump, the Overton window of acceptable debate was much tighter than post-Trump.
100%.
100%, right? So the Trump effect for you is positive in terms of freedom of speech.
Well, that was positive. That effect was positive, 100%. Because,
when did you become a Republican? Is my question.
Yeah, I've never voted in my life, right? I'm not a Democrat.
Trump 2024. Let's go.
So anyway, so Brand announced the debate, and then, due to this absolute feeding frenzy, he rang me up and said, look, I'm going to have to pull the debate. This was the launch of his book.
What you mean? This brave warrior of socialism, this Essex boy, brave people's hero, pulled out in fear over Twitter comments.
Well, Antifa were saying they're going to turn up, right? And in mob. They were threatening to turn up as a mob.
Bring it, lads.
Right?
You bring your boys, I'll bring mine.
It was ironic that it was a launch of a revolution that was stillborn before it had even happened.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So anyway, because he pulled the gig, that then made it a news story.
I can't believe he did that.
Yeah.
It beggars my belief that Russel Brand would do that. Sorry.
But anyway,
I'm his number one fan.
So because he pulled the gig, right, it became a news story then.
Right.
And then the Guardian, the Times, the Morning Star, the Morning Star.
The Morning Star did not like it.
The Evening Standard, a whole host of national press basically repeated the words that I was called next to my name.
Great. Thanks, guys.
So therefore,
well done, truth tellers.
My fate was sealed, right? And then I had to go and endure a whole other ordeal which followed. And the last thing Brand said to me before, I haven't spoke to him again since, was,
I love you, namaste.
No, he said, go and clear your name.
Go and clear your name.
Which was good advice.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the end of 2014. And then I kind of had to go and do some introspective soul searching of why that happened, because I had no idea. I felt like I was just, a player moving through a narrative. Yeah. Rather than being in control of my destiny, I felt as if I was being swept along. And, and spat out the other side. Yeah. So, I had a period of introspection, just left that arena and decided to build a business and thought, go away from that. Build a business, go make some money. Yeah. So we did that. But at the same time, I was still fighting to clear my name. And I did. I went to,
that seems like a terrible injustice. In all seriousness, that seems like a terrible injustice that you should have to waste energy. Yeah. Do you hate Jews? Let's clear your name right now.
Of course not. Don't hate anyone. I love everyone.
Of course I don't. Yeah. Nervous laughter.
No. It's like, but as far as I'm into truth and justice and bringing happiness. Right?
Okay, so what do you think of racism? Do you think it's ever useful? Do you think there are racists?
I don't even know what it means. Right. So the problem is, right, with debate.
Yeah.
right, is that until you can define terms, we could be talking about two totally different things, right? So, I'm a racist. Well, no.
It's an interesting thing that you say, I don't even know what that means. Because when it's brought to me, I always say, I actually don't submit to the notion of race. It's non-scientific.
I'm not a biologist. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I haven't got a clue what's going on with that. I mean, but I don't engage in those conversations unless, some serious definitions can be provided of what it means.
Right.
Because it's a weapon, isn't it?
It's absolutely a weapon.
If it's a weapon and it's being used against me by my enemy, then why would I even engage in that game?
I could... when I interviewed Lawrence Westgaffen here, he said it's actually it's a modern concept. We never had it before the slave trade, he says. And it was there largely constructed to justify the slave trade. Before that, there were peoples. You had peoples, you didn't have race. And there wasn't the sense of like the biological essence of who you are has this behavioral output. It would be like the culture and the people you're from tend towards this. Which might sound like nitpicking,
but it's designed to put you on the defensive.
100%.
Yeah. So 100%. When you're on the defensive, right, is that your opponent has got the advantage, isn't he?
Yeah.
Right. So
it's not a concept that illuminates; it's a concept that obfuscates, and it's largely an offensive weapon. Race is an offensive weapon as a construct,
and allegedly, I don't know if it's true. It was created by Leon Trotsky, right? And Leon Trotsky apparently created the term racism in order to subjugate whoever it was that they wanted to use that weapon against.
Your Russophobia is showing. Why do you hate Russian people?
Yeah, I'm not going down that route. You've already took me where I don't want to go.
Yeah, not right now. Not right now. Yeah. Next podcast we'll do that one. So
anyway, I'll finish that story because it's
I'm just concerned. Like, how many years did you spend concerning yourself with clearing your name of this smear?
So it happened in 2014, and then I won my case in 2016.
Okay.
So it was another 2 years after 5 years of fighting the banks.
You actually won a case that said this was defamation.
So it's not just won a case, right? So the attacks that were against me were by anonymous bloggers, which tells you how much they believed in their allegations, that they wouldn't put their name or face
more
to the
courageous
allegations,
warrior truth tellers.
So I'll debate anyone, anywhere on any forum in order to determine what the truth is. I'm not interested in being right. Yeah, I'm interested in, okay, if you can demonstrate that your argument's more valid than mine, then I'll take on board your ideas. Right. So none of them would face me. Yeah. They hid behind anonymous avatars and anonymous blogs, except two idiots.
Right.
And a woman called Rhiannon Loughton and Adam Ford. Now, I talked about Luciana Berger earlier. She was my MP in Wavertree. And me and my mother campaigned with a local independent against her.
Right.
And then Rhiannon Loughton started calling me and my mother fascists.
Is she from Liverpool, Rhiannon Loughton?
She's a blue-haired Antifa.
Oh, is she?
Yeah. Who knows where these people originate from? What spawned them? I don't know.
Some alien consciousness that's taken over the planet.
So anyway, she was writing these stupid blogs about me and my mother, and it turns out that she used to work for Luciana Berger.
Interesting.
So that was where the thread started to come. And it's not the first time that she's used that office to subjugate and bully and intimidate people. Right. So then her boyfriend joined in, who is Adam Ford. Okay. He started writing blogs about me and my mother. So I ignored them at first until after this event happened. I thought, all right, okay, what can I do? So first of all, I sued Rhiannon Loughton in the county court for defamation and won.
Great.
Right.
Well done.
County court is not recorded. Yeah, it's a local court, right?
Yeah.
So then I took Adam Ford to court for defamation in the High Court. And defamation is a highly technical area of law. And fortunately enough, the background that I'd had in the last 5 years gave me the skills and the tools to be able to defend myself.
You didn't mind plunging your head into the legal definitions and the technical terminology.
It's literally about the meaning of words, isn't it?
Right.
Defamation, are those words that were used against you designed to damage your ability to earn a living? It's a commercial attack in a sense.
This is the center of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, right? It's actually a defamation case.
It is,
a defamation lawsuit.
Yeah, and defamation is under the common law. Right. So you can still have a jury in a defamation case, which is what Johnny Depp has got. Really interesting area of law. I didn't particularly want to spend 2 years looking into it, but there you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, one sec.
We make our plans and God laughs.
So anyway, I sued him for defamation, and I won, hands down. I received £10,000 in damages, which is the maximum you can receive.
Wow.
The judge gave me... he said, if you would have pursued an apology, I would have granted you it. But in light of that, the fact that you want this case to be over as soon as possible, I just want to put it on the record that I would have give you that too. But the problem was it could have went on another year.
Yeah.
Right. So I thought,
so you were being reasonable in the court.
Yeah.
Met you.
Right. And then also he gave me a permanent injunction against Adam Ford or any of his agents. His agents being quite a blanket term from using those names against me again.
This is an extremely favourable ruling for people who aren't familiar with this.
Anyone that wants to read it, it's online. So you just put in Easeman versus Ford 2016.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that it's something I've got quite a bit of pride over. It was a serious achievement in my life because not only did I clear my name, right, because I won my case, is that I'm now part of English legal history forever. Right?
Is that right?
It's if you win a case in the High Court, right, it's recorded into the
legal
annals.
Precedent.
Well, it can be used as a precedent, but it's part of English legal history now.
Amazing.
Yeah, so Easeman versus Ford will live forever.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So I've got absolutely zero chance of getting any of that 10 grand because this guy's just a total wastrel, right? But that wasn't after the money. Right? I was after the judgment, and I got the judgment. Yeah, and it was a great moment for me and my family because it was my family that received, a lot of threats and intimidation, name calling, and this was all because I did a bit of research,
So as it stands today, what, obviously we could do a whole podcast on this, but just briefly, what's your opinion on this Antifa movement, the woke ideology, the basically defaming people online, calling everybody Nazis and anti-Semites? What do you feel about that?
Well, it's a weapon that's losing its power, right? So back in 2014, it was still a very potent weapon. It was a weapon that could lose you your job. It could lose you your family. It could lose you your home, right? And it had to be taken seriously. It wasn't just, it just sticks and stones. No. It was a very, very powerful and potent weapon. But through the misuse and overuse of these terms and the fact that in the cultural war, we're starting to see some of the ground that was totally controlled by these forces, these, I don't even know what to call them, but these forces, they're conceding ground quite regularly now. Some of the cultural battles that are happening in America are starting to show that this area is being lost. So those names and those terms simply don't have the power that they had in 2014 because more and more people are standing up to it and saying, well, and what?
And what, lad?
Yeah, so what? Whatever the names you called. But I mean, what I kind of want to share from my experience is that if you do fight for your rights and if you do commit to the rules of engagement, then you can win.
Yes.
Right? And you shouldn't just roll over when these people try to damage you because of your words. Why are my words so dangerous that they feel the need to silence me and destroy me? What is it about my words that they don't want to hear? Why is their argument not strong enough to be able to go up against my argument?
Yeah, that's a fair fight. They don't even want to fight. They want to hamstring your ability to fight.
Which tells you that there's not much weight or seriousness or truth behind their own.
I'm not a leftist. I'm certainly not a radical leftist in any meaningful sense, but I love Slavoj Žižek, who calls himself a comedian. You know Slavoj Žižek.
Is he the Russian?
Slovenian.
The
guy with the heavy lisp.
Yeah, philosopher.
The philosopher, yeah. And I've seen him speak a couple of times, and he really rails against the left and radical leftism. And one of the things he says is, if we believe in our positions and we believe in our ideological stance, why are we trying to silence people? One of the times I saw him at Birkbeck University, he was saying this, like, we need a more muscular, confident approach where we are willing to engage
But the
in debate
old
with
left,
people.
the old original ideas of the left
Yes.
were economic.
We're going to end up on this old left versus new
No,
left talk, which I love. I think it's fascinating.
It was economic. It was about money.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't about the cultural
Yeah.
situation. It was simply about how can we better distribute the money that's being stolen by the the feudal lords.
It was anti-elite. It was anti-feudal
and that's
lord.
why communism was adopted so readily by the working class, because we believed it gave us an ideology or a vehicle in which to oppose the feudal lords who'd stolen our land, who'd stolen, everything that we once had. And that's why I think it was adopted so heartily by the working class. However, it was a false dawn, as described best in Animal Farm by George Orwell.
Yeah, who was himself a leftist, but he was very, very against totalitarianism, and it was true in Russia. It was a fraudulent movement that hijacked the hopes of the people, and it was true in Germany, which is why they were allies originally. I mean, the socialists, communists, okay, they didn't get along particularly well on those grounds, but fundamentally, it was a motivation of the working classes. And especially the younger working classes, who just so happen to be the people you need as your frontline soldiers anymore. Oh, coincidence. But it's a good way of getting people going.
Yeah.
There will be, you have suffered historically, you have resentment, we will fight, we will bleed, we will die, we will kill for a better future. Every revolution is based on the same bullshit lines. And then who are your new feudal masters? Well, then it'll be Beria and Stalin or Himmler and all of his friends. They're just the new feudal masters. It becomes more of the same thing again and again. It's a terrible shame.
But to finish your question, but you asked me, which was what do I think about those?
Yeah.
So
I was just filling while you were drinking your salty water.
Salty. Yeah. I think they were dangerous, undoubtedly. The Antifa crew undoubtedly were dangerous because they were a blind mob, right? And a blind mob that were the foot soldiers of the elites that they supposedly rail against.
100%. Yeah. I agree with everything you just said in the last sentence. I agree with 100%. Yeah. And I think most people miss it.
Yeah. And it was only through COVID, right? Through the work of Dr. Matthias, I forget his surname, I'm sorry, he's a Belgian psychologist, who brought to my attention and a lot of people was the technical term of mass formation psychosis. Yeah, and until then, you just, it was the brainwashed or, the sheep, but he actually brought to the table the technical definition, right, of how mass formation psychosis works on a population.
Yes.
And once I learned that, tons of pieces of the jigsaw fell into place because now I see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Now I see multiple mass formation narratives, in most spheres of life. Democracy is propped up by a mass formation psychosis.
Yes.
This idea of the left supporting these absolutely deranged ideas that are the antithesis of what their supposed ideology is a result of mass formation psychosis.
Yes.
And I think one of the solutions to these problems, in the same way, I think a better term is mass formation hypnosis rather than psychosis. Yeah. Because that gives a more accurate term of what's happening.
100%.
Yeah. And like with any hypnosis, to break the spell, you've got to keep talking and keep speaking out. Because when the silence, that's when tyrants can truly take over, because there is no opposition to the hypnotic spell that's being cast over the nation. So it's even more important during those times that we speak out, even at great risk to ourselves, because ultimately the risk for us speaking out is less than the risk of living under a totally despotic, tyrannical rule.
100%. 100%. Beautifully put. To close a couple of loops that were left open before, America 2024, would you like to see Trump back in?
If it triggers the left, then yes.
I would love to see Trump back in. Yeah. I was dead against Trump in the beginning.
Yeah.
The world that we live in now, I'm like, you got to get rid of Biden.
Well,
and his
he's got a
administration.
contrast principle now, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So the contrast principle is that, okay, he was getting contrasted against Obama, right?
Yeah.
Now he's getting contrasted against Biden. Could there be a worse president in US history? So he's going to come back. If he does come back, he'll come back as the white knight on the savior of the horse, won't he?
all of the whole, I mean, I'm probably left of center, but the Biden administration is just appalling, and what they stand for is, I would go so far as say it's evil. It's
totally evil. They don't stand for anything.
Yeah.
They've got no principles.
Yeah.
They don't believe in these ideologies. They'll just do whatever it takes to increase their power, their wealth, and what other demonic ideas that they've got.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to see Trump and DeSantis as VP. That would be a strong America.
Yeah. What do you think the
DeSantis.
chances are of that happening? Because the thing is that the problem Trump has to overcome is that if his platform is that he is the elected president of the United States, that the election was rigged, right, and that the Democrats or the Biden administration or whoever it is that controls the Biden administration stole that election, right? If that's his position, why wouldn't he do it again? Right. And if they would do it again, what are you going to do to counter it?
Yeah.
Other than handing it back over to this, oligarchical elite who are hell bent on global destruction?
I can't answer that.
I think he has to answer that question. Is how do you defeat a system that cheated you if that's what happened?
So either it did happen, and if it did happen and what you originally alleged is true, why wouldn't it happen again?
But he alleges it, right?
Yes,
So if he's alleging it, right, is that what are you going to do to stop it happening twice? Because if you can't stop it, then that's the end of democracy, isn't it?
Well, this is where it's actually Jordan Peterson, who I have less and less time for these days, but he pointed it out that that's a major flaw in the Trump narrative, and it has to be resolved.
It has to be.
Because, well, you could be really serious chance of a civil war if you keep banging that drum and say he runs and he loses, and you have a significant number of well-armed people who are very, very dedicated to the cause, who really believe that their country has been overtaken by essentially foreign forces. They'll be flashed back into the American Revolution all over again.
They've got a good argument to say that's true.
100%.
They've got a good argument to say that's true. So Trump has to do something different. He can't just, run on the same strategy and use the same tactics that he did in 2020. Because although I think if what he says is true, if the election was rigged, right, the amount of effort, people, time, resources, and money that must have went into doing that, right? That must have been a monumental effort by the forces on the left to steal that election. Maybe he's saying, well, can they do it twice? So I don't know what the route is he'll take, you see.
And that,
because right now he's a loser, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a loser, right? And
right.
his entire platform is that, I'm a winner, I'll never be beaten.
Yeah.
So he has to overcome if you're a loser, what makes you think you're going to win this time?
Yes, you could argue that and possibly it's a strong argument, the world has changed. The world has changed. The world is changing very, very rapidly. You said before it was 2014, it was a long time ago. And I was like, no, it was only 8 years ago. And then I thought, but the rate of change in modern life is 8 years now is like 20 years in the 60s or something. The world is changing in big, significant ways very, very quickly. It's really
culturally, isn't it? I mean, the advances and the retreats of the cultural war is what really interests me. I'm a student of what's happening on a daily basis in that sense.
Interesting, you have the same sort of optimistic outlook as I do, which is that it's moving in a better direction now. 2014 was pretty dark. And now it does seem to be.
2020 was pretty dark as
2020.
well. November 2020 was pretty dark because, I'm critical of Trump. I think he made some major errors.
Of course.
And I don't think he exercised the role of his office to the full capacity that he could or he should.
Oh, no, I don't think either of us is sat here going, there's an ideal candidate for the most important role in the world.
He was certainly better than getting Hillary Clinton in.
100%.
Right? And he's undoubtedly better than Joe Biden.
Yeah,
And
one of my toenails that I clipped this morning would be better than fucking Joe Biden.
And in a system, a flawed system that is called democracy, right? Even though America is a republic, I'd say that it's degenerated into a democracy.
Yes.
Right? From a republic to a democracy more so. Is even in that flawed system where you've only got two candidates. Yeah, so you've only got a limited choice, and a choice has to be made.
Yeah.
Then Trump is undoubtedly the better choice.
Yeah.
Than the options that were presented.
Yes.
You know,
nobody's saying he's an amazing candidate. My God,
no. He could have been. I mean, he had the promise to be. I mean, the things he was saying in his campaign that just remoralized me, right?
Yeah.
Because it was this idea of political correctness, which is just another euphemism for total censorship. You know, that was rampant in 2015 and 2016. And even the things he said that he never followed through on, like, ending all Islamic travel into the UK, even though that...
Into the USA?
Into the USA, sorry.
Yeah.
Even though that was an extreme point, what he did in that move, and even though he didn't follow through in it, in fact, he went out and made peace in the Islamic world, didn't he? He got rid of ISIS, whoever the CIA were paying for that, and then he went into, Saudi Arabia and all those other countries and made peace. So he was using that statement as a tactic to force the Overton window as far in one direction as possible.
Yes.
Right. So that when it did come back, it only came back a little bit, and all that territory was won.
And he did that multiple times. The North Korea thing, calling the guy Rocket Man and taking the piss
all of a
out of him,
sudden, we were unleashed in that we're able to speak about things that we should not be silenced on. Basic stuff, about our safety, about our security, about our prosperity. These are fundamental issues that should not be silenced. And if they are silenced, people will rebel.
I think when it comes to drawing principles and directions in primary colors in crayon, he's the guy. The actual administration around him needs to be very, very strong.
Yeah. So for a man who was famous for hiring and firing, that was his biggest failure. Yeah. His recruitment policy was basically deep state, wasn't it? He brought in the people that eventually brought him down.
Yeah. There's a good book. I think it's called The Fifth Estate. It is The Fifth Estate, about when he got into power and how that developed. And there was, I have way more time from now than I did when he first came on the scene, but there was some just honking errors that were made.
Yeah.
Another loop that I wanted to close, I was being a bit sardonic and sarky about Russel Brand before. Would you work with Russell again if you had the opportunity?
But I've got major respect for Russell Brand.
You have major respect for Russell Brand.
So what's ironic is that the position he's in now was kind of where I was in 2014.
Right.
So he's moved from the far left, undoubtedly. He's moved to a libertarian position.
I think so, yeah.
Right. And whether that's him chasing views and subscribers, or whether it's genuine, and I think it's genuine.
I think he's matured. I think he's matured. Yeah.
So, it's been interesting to watch his journey because one of the biggest mistakes he made during that period was that he ran a campaign saying don't vote. He ran a campaign on revolution, but yet at the final point he endorsed David Miliband
because he's a fragile narcissist.
But that was his catastrophic mistake, and he disappeared after that, Russel Brand,
as he should have done, because he's
impressionable
and fragile.
But I think he was majorly pressured by the unions and whoever it was that was around him. He put him under immense pressure, right, to make that endorsement because the Tories will get in, all that shit. But he made an error there. He made a miscalculation.
Big mistake.
Made a miscalculation and disappeared, right? And he disappeared for about 2 years, I think. Reinvented himself.
Which I was part of that reinvention process, but we won't go into that today. Go on.
Okay, right. Okay, so you've got a bit of experience with Brand.
I'm a bit bitter about it, to be perfectly frank with you. You may have picked up on that. Hello, my 5 million evolving spiritual warriors. No,
I think what he does, I think it is a natural talent of his verbal fluency and the way he's able to present himself and his arguments is pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
And I do respect where he's travelled from and to, because I know how difficult that journey is to make.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's done it in a way that's not only maintained his fan base, but it's quadrupled it.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can even if it's a grudging respect, it's definitely got to respect.
Yeah, no, what I would say is he's got celebrity and he's using it in a good way. And I think, largely speaking, he is a force for good. But yeah, I'll leave my gripes for another day. There was a recreation of the brand,
Yeah,
and it was very deliberate. And it maybe ran roughshod over some people along the way in order to get him where he is now. But he looks comfortable where he is now, which is fantastic. That's good. And it is, I think, largely it's a force for good. He's encouraging people to think, encouring people to ask
there's
questions.
obviously some question marks, right? In the fact that, how is he still on YouTube, right? Because other people who talk about those subject matters,
how is he still on YouTube? Sorry, go on.
would lose the channel, right?
And nearly did. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I'm going to tease this out here, yeah. So there's that, and there's a few other things, but
how does he get away with it?
How does he get away with it? I mean, maybe he gets away with it because he makes it a question rather than his opinion.
Yes, he's had the answers from a YouTube representative that the rest of us don't get because we don't have a channel his size. So he's actually been trained. He's been told what to do. And I asked, please tell me what I can and can't say. And for me, as a lesser mortal on YouTube, I had to play the game of minefield. And when I touched where I wasn't supposed to go, then they threatened to shut down the whole channel. Yeah. So I currently am under 2 medical misinformation strikes.
I've had 3.
Listen, lad, this is not a competition, but let's make it a competition. Who can get cancelled the fastest? Let's go.
No, so I started the YouTube. So it kind of finishes that loop in a sense.
Yeah,
it took a few years out.
You would work with Russell again. You've got
why not?
Yeah.
Why not work with anyone?
Yeah. Just because I'm taking the piss out of Russell doesn't mean you are. Yeah, go on.
So I had a few years of introspection and rebuilding my life because it took a heavy blow, right? And I wouldn't change that experience for anything because, like I said earlier, I think if you want to find out what type of man you are, you have to put yourself through the trials of fire.
Yeah,
right. Is that if you're just a spectator, right, you'll never truly know anything. All you'll have is beliefs, right? You have to enter the arena and test yourself. And if you're still standing at the end of it, great, you can take that experience to the next one, and you keep building and building and building your character. So even though that was a heavy ordeal and it took a heavy blow on me, it was probably the greatest learning experience that I've ever had. And I thank my enemies for giving me it. So anyway,
strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine, Darth.
Absolutely. My Jedi mind tricks are now at a whole other level that you wouldn't even know. Right. So I'm committed to, helping people that want to know how to use these powers of sovereignty and freedom and how they can use them in their daily lives. That improves their lot, that can push back against the encroachment of the state.
Yeah.
So that's one of my missions, is to share what I've learned and hopefully help people who are facing the same situations and the same ordeals. That's what drives me on. So after a couple of years, it wasn't for a couple of years, it must have been 4 years, I set a business up, and then I was just getting on with that really. And then COVID came and the government showed that they can pull the rug at any time. And in a business that took me 5 years to build, it collapsed quicker than building 7, in a week.
Right.
So
descended at free fall speed despite no contact from any airplane.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what happened. It happened within, real time. So that happened, and it re-radicalized me.
Right.
And brought me back into the game.
Yeah.
And then I started the podcast, during COVID. And I've been doing that since. I've been trying to, build my channel on YouTube. But unfortunately, I keep picking guests who go against the terms and conditions.
You should just call your channel Laurence Easeman's Shadow Band.
Yeah.
Just call it the Shadow Band podcast.
Yeah. So that's what it feels happening at the moment anyway. So I did an interview with David Icke that was banned within 12 hours. I did an interview with Piers Corbyn that was banned within 24 hours.
What did David say and what did Piers say that got it chopped so quickly?
It's about I don't want to get your channel.
Oh, yeah, because you can't Yeah. I interviewed David, and he said the same thing about the and that was it.
Yeah,
Just you're done.
That's it. You're done.
You can't talk about it.
No,
you're best off.
But
not
again,
even mentioning it.
why can't we talk about it? Why can't we have an open marketplace of ideas? What are you afraid of? Why can't
they're afraid of rebellion? They're afraid of sweet thought. They're afraid that you won't obey blindly.
There you go.
Suck the cocks of
I
Satan.
want them to say that. Right?
Say that you want us to suck the cocks of Satan.
I want to hear from their mouth so that we know what we're dealing with there. You know what I mean? You evil spawn of Satan. Yeah.
What would Bill Hicks make?
And then we did one with Dean Garnett.
Yeah.
You had Dean Garnett, yeah.
No,
Great guest. Get Dean on his brilliant.
Okay.
Right? So again, he was speaking about the myth of contagion, which is it's a book that's been published. It's been published by authoritative writers and doctors, and they pull that too for medical misinformation. So I've had 3 strikes. The first one was a warning, and then I've had 2 strikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm having to reevaluate my position.
Now, all of this has been taking place, and we're drawing to the end of the interview now. We also have been discussing Nietschze and Jung, which we've been chatting about on Telegram and that. How does this fit into your worldview and the direction you're moving in now? Why have you suddenly become interested in Nietschze? This is usually...
I haven't suddenly become interested in Nietschze.
Okay.
I'm interested in philosophy, as a general term. I'm not really, well studied on it, but I do try to dip in where I can. And it was just talking to you, and about how you were describing Nietzsche's thought and some of the ideas that he had were completely revolutionary, weren't they? And his ability to articulate those ideas in such a lucid and entertaining manner is what made me attracted to him.
Right.
I can't say that I'm in any way, shape, or form a scholar of Nietzsche, and I only know very much at the preliminary stages. But that whole period of young Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, and Dostoevsky, amazing period of intellectual thought and philosophical ideas, which drive man forward, don't they? And I just think it's a wealth of information. And I started reading a biography of Nietzsche, really, really good biography, and I was reading about his relationship. I mean, he's quite a sad, pathetic figure, isn't he?
Yes.
Right?
Tragic.
It's ironic that he promotes the Uberman as the Superman, but yet he's this frail virgin, and who had a life of, illness, sickness, and loneliness, And then his relationship with Richard Wagner is just spectacularly interesting, and about how this nobody became almost best friends in a father-son relationship with probably one of the greatest composers of all time. And that to and fro from their house in Switzerland, some really interesting stuff there. And the idea of the walks that they used to go on. Yeah, and Nietzsche said that he said something like, "Don't trust any idea that doesn't come from walks alone in the wilderness." Right. Yeah. So. His pursuit of ambulation was something that was really inspiring for me. So I've been walking quite a lot since then. No phone, no anything. I go and do an hour's walk in the wilderness because I live by the beach and I live by the sand dunes.
Oh, lovely.
So, barefoot through the beach, no phone, nothing for an hour, and see if I can come up with any...
Does the brain good, right?
Does it really good. But without being... Because that's another thing, isn't it, is that they don't want us to have any periods of solitude, because solitude, without being connected to the digital matrix that's currently being enforced upon us, gives us these ideas of freedom and truth and justice, and all those things come from moments of quiet solitude, because the propaganda system that's run the mass formation narratives can't get you when you are alone. Yeah. So they don't want us having these moments of quiet. And, I think it's probably one of the best things that we can do is at least some part of the day is avoid all of the digital narratives that are coming in from all of our devices, which is becoming more increasingly difficult by the day. And have periods of quiet ambulation in a place of solitude.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
So that's what I've got from Nietzsche.
That's what you got from Nietzsche. Very nice. Finally, Jung.
Don't know much about Jung. I couldn't really discuss him. I'm kind of wanting to read Man and His Symbols. Because I think...
From an outside point of view, this is always interesting to ask. And I know it's not very academic, it's not very intellectual, but when you look at the concept of Jung as what you think you might get, what do you think you would get if you studied Jung?
A deeper understanding of the archetypes that govern man's dreams and ideas.
Okay.
And you know, the whole idea of a hero with 1,000 faces, Joseph Campbell, I think that's kind of infused with some Jungian ideas, or the other way around, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole world and a whole realm that we haven't been initiated into.
Okay.
That I think we could definitely benefit from an exploration into.
So you think there is like a world of archetypes that is worth looking into and to see how that influences our daily
100%,
life?
because again, I keep coming back to mass formation, but that was such a big effect on me, is that narratives, right, can control populations.
100%.
So understanding the archetypes of narratives, like a Hollywood screenwriter will work with something called the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Hero's journey is directly from Joseph Campbell, probably Jungian as well. And that these narratives is that if you don't understand the underlying structure of them, you can get lost in the drama of the narrative.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do understand the underlying structure of the narrative, right, and you know the archetype of the hero who refuses the journey, or the mentor arrives at this point in the story in order to take the hero on a particular part of the journey, then you know what's happening to you. You can become more aware of it and oppose it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely an interesting angle to go down.
There's a bit of Hamlet and Shakespeare coming on today. And by opposing, end them. It's lovely. Yeah, Shakespearean. Laurence, thank you very much for coming in today, mate.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.
Let's do this again sometime. Is there anything you want to say to people before we wrap up?
Yeah. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, even though it's shadow banned. It's Laurence Easeman, Eyes Wide Open. And, you know, if you want to get in touch, send me an email.
Is that the best place for people to find you? Is there any other social media?
I'm on all the social medias currently because I'm trying to find out which. Well, if I get banned from one, at least I'll have the other one as well.
Okay, so you're there on Instagram as well?
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
You're TikToking? Do you do any dances?
No. I'm 6'4" and left-footed. I can't dance to save my life.
And TikTok's the one that's popping off the most for
so
you
I'm doing
right now.
shorts at the moment. So what I normally do is long-form interviews.
Yeah.
Because I've been a bit, moving about, I haven't been able to do them for a while. But I'm doing shorts on TikTok, 1 minute videos.
Yes.
And they've exploded on TikTok, which
They're
is
very good.
Yeah, which is a platform I wouldn't have even considered, a couple of months ago. But yeah.
If you want bite-sized chunks of some of the concepts that Laurence has been talking about today, I highly recommend the TikTok and the Instagram. If you're looking for Laurence on Instagram, if you go through my follower list, we're friends on Insta there as well, and you can find his TikTok that way. But there's loads of the way you explain things very, very quickly is interesting, and it's easily digestible. So yeah, awesome, mate. Let's have you in again sometime if you're up for it.
Thanks again, mate. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.